Trixie's Forest Retreat. By Crow's Crow. Chapter 1. Running. Trixie blinked some of the remains of her magical smoke out of her eyes, hearing the thundering of her own hooves upon the road below her while she fled away from the townsfolk as fast as she could into the dark purple glow of the night. A loud angry voice rose up behind her. Why that little? She glanced back just long enough to spot the winged mare take to the skies and fly in her direction. The sight spurred her on to run even faster. She recognized that voice as the loud, multicolored foal whom she'd shown up earlier, but not before getting an impressively clear display of just how fast the Pegasus was. Trixie was sure she was pursued by her after that. She could only hope to make it as far away as possible. At least that way, when the rainbow mare would eventually catch up and drag her back, Trixie would make the trip as long as possible before facing the townsfolk again. She dropped her ears flat in fright at the idea of being dragged back to town. Just keep going. Maybe she will lose Trixie in the dark. She immediately chastised herself for the foolish notion. There was not a single cloud in the sky, and the stars lit up her enchanting white mane and tail like a beacon. She felt a pang of bitter regret at the thought that she had lost her hat and cape somewhere in what remained of her carriage. Their purple collar and star motif would have camouflaged her quite well. The only place she could see that was actually dark was the forest to the left. Wait, that's it. Trixie just needs to make it to the trees. She did not waste a single moment to even look back as she swerved towards the tree line. A light orchid glow surrounded her horn to summon up quick puffs of smoke as she tried to keep herself from being too easy of a target. As she galloped past the first tree, Trixie flashed a triumphant smile. She had made it. Trixie weaved through the trees quickly as she dashed deeper into the darkness of the forest, extinguishing the orchid glow to blend into the black. She was completely certain she had shaken the Scion Pegasus. Ha, ha. That foolish fool was outwitted by the great and powerful tree. Oof. In her haste to outsmart the Pegasus by ceasing to emit light in the dark forest, she had also made it impossible to actually weave out of the way of the trees and smacked straight into the rough black bark of what she estimated was surely the sturdiest tree in all of Equestria. She bounced off the tree and collapsed at its roots. She curled up to cradle her poor muzzle with her four hooves. Ah. Trixie will not forget this. You. She tried to recall her pursuer's name, but she had not truly paid any attention to it. She did however recall the name of her friend, having heard it just after her humiliation. That would just have to do for now. Twilight Sugar Cube. Still, she just knew that not being able to remember the Pegasus pony's name was going to nag at her all day. Trixie rested on her back and comfortably on the hard roots of the tree that had toppled her. She was breathing heavily to catch her breath after her galloping escape. She shifted her body to slip in between two roots till her blue fur laid down upon the cold forest floor, and actually felt a bit of relief with her new position. Trixie stared up at the just barely visible night sky through the heavy canopy of the forest. Excellent. There is no way those fools will find the great and powerful Trixie now. Trixie boasted inwardly of the results of her genius idea. Just as planned, of course. She fought the urge to crow of her victory out loud for the moment, however. Although she was well hidden, the ponies might still hear her. Her eyes shifted back and forth, trying to make out anything in the darkness like the shapes of approaching ponies or lit up ones through the trees. After some time, Trixie was finally satisfied that it was indeed impossible to tell that she was here, so she allowed her mind to rest on another thought. Well, it is good that the great and powerful Trixie has triumphed over her foes. But Trixie can't see a hoof before her eyes, and creating light would be counterproductive to her escape. Perhaps it is best if Trixie remains here until daylight and gathers her strength. She nodded slightly at her own train of thought and stifled a yawn while closing her eyes, not that it really made that much difference in the darkness. The events of the night had been so terrifying when she was driven out of her bed to battle a raging Ursa Major by those foolish colts. If that Twilight Sugar Cube could do it, Then surely the great and powerful Trixie could have had those colts wait till morning like Trixie commanded. No pony would have the energy to fight after spending the day performing feats beyond imagination. Not even Trixie. I mean, the great and powerful Trixie. Oh, who is Trixie kidding? The memory of her rude waking forced a yawn from her. Trixie began to realize just how exhausted she was from her performance of unimaginable feats, bravely holding of the line against the Ursa, escaping the ungrateful town and the prismatic pony. Thoughts and worries of the ungrateful Ponyvillians tracking down the great and powerful Trixie played through her head. What would they do if they caught her? Just how close were they right now? They were probably looting her poor wrecked carriage and dividing up the spoils to pay for a couple of minor claw marks on the tooth the Ursa Minor briefly rested its paws on. Trixie was starting to feel sleep overtake her while she pondered on that second feat. That blasted name on the tip of her tongue. Prism Crescent? No. It was something to do with her act. Was it not? The answer escaped for the day as the last of Trixie's resistance was overcome, setting her drifting off between the rough tree roots deep in the ever-free forest. Chapter 2. Rain. Trixie boldly marched into Ponyville with her head held up high and a victorious gleeful smile upon her face while her horn glowed a strong orchid. That same orchid glow surrounded a thick rope leash that held secure a gigantic blue bear while she dragged it through the streets for all to see. Behold, naysayers! The great and powerful Trixie has captured the dreaded Ursa Major for your unworthy eyes to gaze upon. Is there any who could claim such a feat? Twilight Sugar Cube merely put a baby to sleep. The great and powerful Trixie has vanquished her foe. She laughed loudly while her magic tied the leash around a nearby tree, making the massive creature kneel before her. Her hoof reached up to scratch the strangely transparent blue fur covering the beast's chin. Trixie turned her head to look upon the gawking ponies all around her. The looks of astonishment made the mare's chest swell with pride. Now return Trixie's belongings to her before Trixie sees fit to. Ew! A moist dribble of drool landing on her head from the massive Ursa above her. Apparently it was enjoying her strokes a bit too much. She ceased her strokes and rested both hooves on the ground while she shook her head to clear the drool away. Bring Trixie's hat immediately, Ponyvillians. Another drop fell upon her to her dismay, despite having stopped her caressing. She grumbled while moving out from under the Ursa and raised a hoof to make her next demand when more drool landed upon her snout and hooves. She twisted around as gradually everything got dark and wet. What in Equestria is going on? Suddenly she felt cold, and her back ached while the sky and ground seemed to have switched places. Rain kept pattering away at her body, and she was just barely able to make out dark ominous clouds through the heavy foliage above her. Trixie blinked against the rain and raised up a hoof to shield her eyes from the drops that found their way through the canopy. Her other hoof stroked along a rough root to her side as she tried to orientate herself. That's right. Trixie is not in Ponyville. Her voice wavered as she recalled her current position. Not yet. She quickly corrected herself. She shivered from the cold while wiggling her soaked self free from the roots and scrambling onto her hooves, looking up at the sky. The clouds were dark, and the rain was heavy, but she could see them clearly enough. So it is day then? She looked around the dark forest for a moment, then back up at the sky to check again. Really? Could have fooled Trixie. She concentrated for a moment to summon up an illumination spell and let a gentle light bathe the forest around her. The old gnarled tree Trixie had already been intimately familiar with, as with the leaf-covered muddy ground for that matter. She let her gaze wander further to take in the brown and dark green bushes with thick thorns and oddly colored but somewhat soft pink mosses on the tree roots. She swallowed a bit at the thought that if she had actually dodged the tree, she might have run headlong into something worse. Well, that is not important right now. First let's find shelter. Maybe Trixie should backtrack to the edge of the forest first though. Let's see now. If Trixie hit the tree here, then that means Trixie came from Turning her back to the tree, she lit up a particularly dense and thorny shrub and took a step back. What the hey? That can't be right. Trixie looked back to the tree and then to the shrub again. If Trixie came from there, how did she pass through? She raised a hoof to her chin while she pondered the issue, then struck the ground. Well, it is clearly impossible, so Trixie could not have come from there. She exchanged a quick nod in agreement with herself, deciding that hitting the tree must have disorientated her a bit. Bushes do not move about after all. The light of her horn passed along the bush till she found an opening. She smiled at the little victory while trotting through it, keeping the tree she'd slept against to her back. An uneasy feeling came over her as she walked, as though something was not right. Everything looked different, but then again it had been quite dark, and she'd come from the opposite direction. It was only natural she did not recognize the way. A snapping sound to her right made Trixie's ears stand up straight. She quickly jumped to the left and set her horn aglow, peering into the shadows. Show yourself. The great and powerful Trixie demands it. She did her best to keep her nerves steady and appear confident. She thought, mere false play for a stage pony as great and powerful as Trixie. The following moments, she heard nothing but the pattering of the rain, no footsteps, cracks or even any animal noises. She tilted her head a little at the realization. Is a forest always this quiet? Are there no animals here? While she stood still in the rain, the cold slowly bit harder into her before she finally relented and resumed her course quickly. It was not much, but at least she was warmer while she kept moving. Though her pace was much slower than when she dashed away from her pursuer, after a half an hour of walking with no end in sight, it began to dawn on the greatest equine who ever lived that she really should be out of the forest at this point. The orchid light was much dimmer than before, as it became more and more difficult to keep up her spell, as well as to push herself to move forward. Suddenly, a monstrous growl tore through the air right behind her. She spun around in fright, redoubling her efforts on igniting her horn to get a good look. If she was lucky, she could scare off the beast with the bright light. However, she saw nothing, so she zigzagged quickly, certain this time it was not her imagination. The deep growl reached the perked-up ears of the now alert unicorn once again. Her pale blue face turned red, and Trixie slapped a hoof against her face as she located the source of the sound. It had been a long time since her last extra haste mouthy. Chapter 3. Reinforcing. A low grumbling growl accompanied Trixie on her march through the forest. At first it was cause for alarm, but at this point just another point on her list as she muttered to herself. Really? Does Celestia have it out for the great and powerful Trixie? Trixie only claimed to be more powerful than her wands. Okay per performance. But still. The light of her horn slowly began a disconcerting flickering, which evoked an irritated sigh. Great. What else can go wrong today? Trixie's eyes went wide as she realized what she'd said, and quickly covered her mouth with a hoof. No, Trixie did not just say that. Moisture beaded up at the corners of Trixie's eyes while she just waited for the universe to one-up her again. Between being lost, hungry, cold, wet, humiliated, dispossessed, and outright terrified by the Ursa, it certainly had seemed to do its best to punish her for having the audacity to put up a performance. She dropped to the ground and huddled up, tucking her legs tightly against her body. Trixie hid her head below her front hooves while her eyes closed tight. She braced herself for whatever came next, but the pattering of droplets around her was all she heard. After several moments of chilling silence, she carefully opened one eye to glance around, then up at her horn, seeing the familiar orchid glow still held strong. Trixie let out a breath she had not even realized she was holding. Safe. As little a victory as not having another horrible thing happen to a pony might have been, it was just what Trixie needed to regain some confidence. That's right, what is there to fear? The great and powerful Trixie needs only to take control of the situation. She brought up a hoof to wipe her eyes clear. Rainwater, she interjected in her mind. Trixie went over the little checklist of her problems she had made in her panic once again, but this time, sorting them into issues she could deal with right now and those that she just had to put off until later. Shelter and food. Well, those cannot be that difficult. Trixie is in a forest. Almost everything here should be food, said Trixie with a forced smile. Though not all of it equally appetizing. A small shiver ran down her spine as she recalled some of the emergency meals she'd eaten while on the road when funds ran lower than usual, but this would be better. Trixie trotted towards the nearest tree and glanced down at the soft pink moss that covered the roots. She pondered to herself if it would double as a good source of food before shook her head and decided against pressing her luck so soon after attempting fate. If she got sick, that would be just the kind of thing to make everything even worse. A slow trot through the forest while she examined the various plants, bushes and roots, bit by bit, looking for any that she recognized as edible. Strangely, the flora in the forest was so different from what she was at least vaguely familiar with, as if it were an entirely different region. She gazed down upon her collected bounty gathered together on the forest floor. A small hoop full of purple berries, some sand-brown roots she had dug up from the trees, a few black thorny vines, a blue flower, and a pile of the pink moss. She was not especially sure of herself that she had actually found something she could eat safely among these. Okay, Trixie, all you need to do is eat a bit of one of these and wait to find out if it has any harmful effect. It should be okay if Trixie only eats a tiny bit. She won't be ill long even if it turns out that way. She nodded vigorously at her wisdom and leaned down, opening her mouth to try the first bite. 5 minutes had passed, with the blue-furred open muzzle still hovering over the pink moss, then Trixie swayed towards the roots, trying to bring herself to eat them instead, but she stayed just as frozen. Trixie shook while mentally flogging herself. Come on, just one bite. How bad could it be? Don't be such a coward, the chances of any of these being that poisonous are... Well, Trixie doesn't know. That's not the point. Don't be so weak. Weak, the word stung the chaumare's heart, making her chest tighten and her breaths shallow. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to force the feeling back again. No. Trixie is great and powerful. She shouted at the top of her lungs without care of who or what might hear her. In fact, she'd welcome any kind of audience at this point, even those Ponyvillians just to witness her. While her determination still held, she brought her head down and devoured the makeshift meal before her. The taste was bitter and sandy, then it became sweet, light, and finally physically painful as one of the thorns dug into the roof of her mouth. Spitting out the thorny piece, she slumped back on her haunches, breathing quickly. The growling of her stomach had stopped, and she actually felt a bit warmer, much to her delight, after her meal. Her mouth tasted weird, and there was the dull pain from the thorn that made her tear up, but the trade-off had been, to Trixie's satisfaction, a pretty good one. It was then she noticed through blurred vision that the clear forest floor contained only the offending piece of thorny vine. She blinked slowly as she ran that revelation through her head again. Where was the rest of the food? She wiped away the tears brought on by the thorn to clear her vision, concentrating on brightening the light from her horn a bit more to search. But she could only find scraps and rested a hoof on her stomach. Way to go, Trixie. You sure showed yourself, she grumbled, annoyed with herself. Now if Trixie is sick, Trixie won't know what it was. Hey, if it was all of it, Trixie might not even have to worry about it after tomorrow. She struck herself against her forehead hard enough to invoke a yelp. Wah, well, it does mean Trixie's hunger problem is solved. And if Trixie is fine, it means all of those were good to eat. Except maybe the vines. She pushed herself up on her hooves and whipped her mane out of her eyes. That's right. The great and powerful Trixie has overcome problem number 1. Now to find shelter. Or the way out. Both required the same action anyway, and she was not partial to which outcome she landed on. Trixie set out to continue her way through the muddy forest with renewed vigor to find her goal. Or come up short and die trying. Chapter 4. Refurnishing. The rainwater of the forest formed small miniature rivers, running their natural course towards the lowest point. Some made simple puddles, and others created small streams that ran into a modest cave just at the bottom of a hill not too far ahead of the drenched unicorn. Trixie stood silently half-hidden behind one of the trees while she observed the small cavern she had found. Her first instinct had been to gallop towards it to get out of the rain, but she thought better of it at the last moment and hid. That had been a while ago, though it was not clear to Trixie how much time had passed while she watched the cave. Her ears were perked up, and her eyes glowed to the darkness inside, trying to get any kind of hint as to its potential occupants. She hoped that the cavern had at least a chance of being empty. She spared another quick glance down upon her only source of that hope, the streams of rainwater flowing slowly into the cavern. If it's the twist in there. Would any animal really bother making its burrow there? She pondered briefly if she, the great and powerful Trixie, even wanted a shelter that was not good enough for the animals. Beggars can't be choosers. She took a step away from the tree, then blinked and swiftly added, "Not that Trixie is one." She made her way towards the small cavern slowly and ignited her horn to shine a light inside, relieved to find it was in fact empty for the most part. Some water had pooled together here and there, but most of it seemed to drain out through a crack in the rock, which ensured the cave did not flood completely. Wasting no further time to get out of the rain, Trixie trotted inside down the slightly inclined rocky slope. As much as she'd gotten used to the raindrops trickling down on her unprotected head the last couple hours, she felt infinitely better without them. Laying down on the rough stone with a small winch, Trixie tried her best to get somewhat comfortable. Really, it couldn't be any softer for Trixie, she complained, unable to find a good position. Pondering briefly, she got up on her hooves again and flashed a grin. One way or another, she was going to make this bearable. Trixie headed back out into the rain. She returned a moment later, levitating as much of the pink moss she had been able to find. Stepping back into the shelter of the cave, Trixie shook the mosses vigorously near the crack in the stone, trying to get out as much water as possible before dropping it down onto the rocky surface of the cave. She stared down with a look of glee at her makeshift pink bed, admiring her handiwork, before settling down on top of it. She let out a satisfied sigh, enjoying the soft feeling against her fur, which shielded her almost perfectly from the rock. That's more like it. Her eyes shifted towards the entrance of her little shelter, watching the rain clatter down where it couldn't get to her anymore. A tired smile settled on Trixie's face as she just enjoyed her new position for the moment. She let her mind wander now that she finally had the time to think properly without an immediate worry to attend to. This is nice. Trixie thinks she can stay here for a while. She looked down at the damp pink moss, then rested her head against it, closing her eyes. Wait, this is what makes Trixie happy now. Finding a slightly less moist place to be miserable. Trixie grimaced at the thought. Just yesterday Trixie had the softest of beds, her own home, her own show. Why did they try so hard to mess it all up for Trixie? Was the whole town in on it? As she thought back on the day before, it seemed so far away. Trixie's show had just barely begun when some ponies near the stage immediately began to complain and criticize her performance without so much as giving her a chance to show what she could even do. Trixie is sure it was not Trixie's act. All the other ponies were smiling at the great and powerful Trixie. They laughed when Trixie defeated her challengers. The great and powerful Trixie prevailed. The audience loved how Trixie showed those arrogant ponies their place. Her voice rose theatrically. She tactfully left out the part that she was the one who had issued the challenge in her monologue. Trixie toned the volume back down to a muttering. It's not as if it was Trixie's fault those two fools believed everything Trixie said. It did not last very long, however. How did they even find an accursed Ursa? Are those really that common here? She could feel her blood boil at the idiocy of it all, almost screaming out, who brings an Ursa to town? Who knows how many ponies it would have eaten if Trixie was not there? But do they care? No. She slammed a hoof down on the hard stone. Sure, Trixie did not vanquish it. But Trixie stalled it long enough, distracted it from those two falls even. She simmered down again, recalling her efforts in fighting the Ursa Minor, knowing she did not stand a chance. It had been horrifying, but she could not just leave it rampage, could she? A rattling sound drew her attention. The hoof against the stone surface was shaking. She lifted her extended foreleg from the stone common and rested it over her muzzle to cover up her eyes with a whimper. Trixie thought she was a goner for sure, crushed like the rest of Trixie's things. She took deep breaths while trying not to think about it too much. In walks the Twilight Sugar Cube after a Trixie says she can't do it, and the mare does it. Everything Trixie could not do that, unicorned it in moments. Humiliating Trixie by Reska. She froze when the word rolled past her lips. Wait. That's right, isn't it? Would Trixie be dead without her? A long pause followed as she contemplated on the thought that had escaped her in the heat of the moment. She did. But why would she do that? Did she not believe Trixie was the cause? As far as she recalled, the rest of the town had been quick to blame her for lying and tricking the duo into bringing the Ursa. Especially the cyan Pegasus that hunted her down at the end. An old itch came back to her mind as she recalled the flying mare. Oh hey, not again. Vapor step. Nimbus run. She shifted her hoof from the top of her muzzle onto the moss and rested her chin on top. She gazed outside at the parting clouds and sighed. Figures that it would stop raining as soon as Trixie. Her eyes went wide as she gazed up through the thick canopy of the sky, the clouds clearing up and revealing a colorful spectacle stretched out across the sky. Rainbow. And ash. Chapter 5. Rainbow. Why that little? Shouted Rainbow Dash, watching the fraudulent loudmouth try to make her escape into the night. Not if she had anything to say about it. She sunk through her hooves for a split second, then kicked off the ground and flared her wings, taking to the skies at top speed in hot pursuit. Just let her go, said Twilight with such peace, that the tone was as surprising to her as the words themselves. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the blue trickster gallop away, the one that put all her friends, no the entire town, in danger. What the hey? She wants me to let her get away with this? Why? Glaring while trying to push down the hot feeling in her veins, she turned her eyes away from the fleeing mare and settled them on her friend for the answer. Upon seeing her confusion, Twilight continued, maybe someday she will learn her lesson. She turned her attention upon the pair of falls that had caused so much trouble, shooting them a look that could burn through a tree. Now about you two. With the town's attention focused on Twilight and the duo, Rainbow Dash turned her gaze towards the road again. She blinked as Trixie appeared to have vanished somehow before her attention was drawn by a quick-moving silvery blur through the fields, puffing up little clouds of smoke. Rainbow Dash tilted her head and raised up an eyebrow as she observed the spectacle. What in Equestria is that pony doing? She increased the power of her wing beats to fly up higher while down below, she could hear Spike Diamante be punished as well with surprising glee. She shook her head a bit while watching a distant orchid light rush through the forest before it suddenly went out. She could have sworn she'd seen one of the trees shake shortly afterwards. Chuckling to herself, she glanced down at the dispersing gathering below, pondering if she should say something, but shrugged her shoulders. I'm sure it can wait. She took off in a rainbow-colored streak back home to try and salvage what few hours she had left before the scheduled early morning downpour. Rainbow Dash pushed the last dark cloud into place over Ponyville, raising up a hoof to her mouth to cover an irritated yawn. Whoever was responsible for missing yesterday afternoon's drizzle had a lot to answer for, making her get up this early. Oh right, that was my assignment. She had tried to show up Trixie with her instant rainbow stunt, only to get caught in that little cheetah's tornado. Her eyes crossed a bit when she remembered how much trouble she had just trying to keep down her lunch, let alone try to fly and do her job, after that. With a grumble, she folded her forelegs over her chest and kicked one of Cloud's. A flash of lightning crackled through it. Glancing towards the ever-free forest, or rather the mass of especially dark clouds that overextended from Ponyville to cover a certain section of the forest, her trademark mischievous grin crept over her face. Worth it. Diving through the clouds, Rainbow Dash swooped down towards the small little hovel right below her. She spotted a small exodus of forest animals all skittering inside the cottage at the behest of what had to be the kindest pony she had ever met. Hey Fluttershy! Pulling up from her dive just in time to avoid smacking straight into the ground, she skidded to a halt beside her soft-spoken friend. Fluttershy stood beside the doorway of her house, holding it open for a family of mice. Hey Rainbow Dash. A warm smile offered to her friend. What are you doing here? Nah, not that you're not welcome anytime. I mean I'd love to have you visit. I mean that you are visiting, not that you don't usually visit. She kept tripping over her belly-whispered words, only earning herself an amused grin from Rainbow Dash. Relax, Fluttershy, I know what you mean. A brief thought of teasing her friend occurred to her, but it was quickly dismissed. I just wanted to check on you, you know, with the Ursa and all. Oh. I'm okay. It just charged right past here then floated back a little later. I can't believe some pony woke up the poor sweetheart. Oh yeah, the poor sweetheart. She rolled her eyes. You should have seen it try to eat snips and snails. It was just endearing. What the hey is wrong with the Trixie that she would send those two out to find an Ursa just so she can show off? She couldn't even do it. Fluttershy leaned down to nudge the last rabbit through the doorway reassuringly. That's just awful. Did she really do that? Heading inside as well once she was sure no more animals were coming to take shelter, she held the door open. Would you like to come in too, Rainbow Dash? The first raindrops had begun to fall, darkening her fur into spotted blue. Yeah sure, I got something good to share anyway. Following Fluttershy inside, she shut the door behind her. So you remember I told you about Trixie's show last night, right? Well it gets better, it was a dark and stormy night, just like this one. Settling down upon her couch, Fluttershy gave a quick glance outside at the downpour. But yesterday we had clear skies all day. Didn't we? I thought that is why you made Thursday. She got cut off halfway. Oh come on, are you trying to ruin the story? Taking a seat beside Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash gave her a little nudge and flashed a grin. Letting her eyes travel to the window, she gazed at the ominous clouds, but her grin only widened at the sight. I'm sorry. Tilting her head down, she allowed the long pink locks to shelter her. She knew what was coming by the look on her friend's face. So as I was saying, Rainbow Dash cleared her throat briefly, then resumed in her patented campfire story voice. It was a dark and stormy night. Chapter 6. Rage. Rainbow Dash cleaved through the top layer of the unnatural cloud covering over the ever-free forest, leaving a multicolored streak in her wake. She loved the cool feeling of the moisture onto her fur combined with the winds. It cooled her down while she raced to the next cloud to puncture. Normally, she thought only of doing it faster. She was much more distracted today, however, with her mind continuously drifting back to her conversation with Fluttershy. Things had been going so well as she told her animal-loving friend about the Ursa's rampage. Rainbow Dash had spent a good deal of time telling her all about the actual Ursa, exaggerating its ferocity and danger to the town, before telling of the way the Ursa was vanquished and Trixie driven off. Rainbow Dash should have smelled the trouble coming when she'd seen the worry on Fluttershy's face when she mentioned that Trixie had fled into the forest. However, she had been much too busy complaining about Twilight's apparent lack of caring and just assumed it had worried her friend too. I just thought if I was gonna have to get up early and get wet cause of her, then so should she. Rainbow Dash had protested, trying to convince Fluttershy she'd done nothing wrong. Fluttershy looked down at the floor, scraping her hoof along the wood. But It's the ever-free forest. She's all alone in there. I don't think any pony deserves that. And you made it worse? Raising her head just enough, Fluttershy looked Rainbow in the eyes. Didn't you say that no pony ever comes out? Except us. Kicking through a particularly wet cloud brought Rainbow Dash back to reality. One look, and the perfect prank feels like the worst thing in the world. How does that pony do that? Her stomach felt like she'd taken one of Applejack's bucks, just thinking about the disappointment in her friend's eyes. As if she was bullying that braggart. It's not fair. Why do I have to feel bad just because that blowhard got herself into trouble? Just cause I didn't stop her? Twilight even told me not to. Rainbow Dash racked her mind for reasons she could levy against her feelings, but each one just felt hollow in comparison when she tried to imagine using them on Fluttershy. Floating still in mid-air, she brought a hoof to her face. No pony ever comes out, except us, huh? Oh, that was subtle. She dragged the hoof down, her eyes rolling. She did not expect me to just clear the clouds, did she? Flying up higher, she observed the clouds below. She estimated it was thin enough at last for a single dash to part the clouds. Stalling for time while she tapped her hoof against her head, she scrunched up her eyes. Come on. There's got to be something you can say if you go back empty-hoofed, right? Anything that would make Fluttershy accept that Trixie is fine where she is. She pictured herself talking to Fluttershy for a moment, then opened her eyes with a sigh. Fine. Diving down at breakneck speed, Rainbow Dash ripped through the cloud cover, tearing it in half with a final swoop. Rainbow Dash turned back to admire her handiwork while the clouds slowly drifted apart. The heavy moisture in the air broke the light, making it seem as if the blur of her mane and tail had remained frozen in mid-air. Staying quiet, she stared at the colors, just appreciating for a moment how awesome she could be, even unintentionally. Rainbow. And Dash. Rainbow Dash blinked as she heard that grating voice below her. For the briefest of moments, she considered pretending she had misheard, before diving through the parting clouds towards the source of the sound. Trixie? Trixie's ears perked up. Her head snapped towards the sky in shock as she heard her name called. Hooves slapped before her mouth while she stared up with wide eyes. Seriously? Of all the times to blurt out loud. She was not sure how long the Pegasus had been on her trail, but this was clearly no accident as far as Trixie was concerned. She weighed her options between hiding, fleeing, and confronting Rainbow Dash. Trixie had bested the Pegasus once before, though she was not entirely sure she could do it now. But to flee or hide from just one pony was clearly a sign of weakness. No, Trixie would have to come out with a strong bluff, or warning rather, and scare her off to get reinforcements. That should work. Hey, are you gonna stay in there? Looks wet. Rainbow Dash stood right at the entrance of her little cavern, her head tilting while she observed Trixie. She gave a chuckle at the sight of her predicament. Startled by the interruption, Trixie scrambled to her hooves. No. Trixie wasn't ready yet. And just what is so funny? She yelled with as much strength as she could muster, letting her horn glow up. She rose to stand tall, but the low ceiling collided painfully against her head and horn, making her quickly lower down again, the orchid light dying out with a flicker. The sight seemed to amuse the other pony greatly as the chuckle broke into full-out laughter while Trixie rubbed her head and glared up at Rainbow Dash. Stop laughing at the great and powerful Trixie. She will not stand for this. Moisture beaded up at the corners of her eyes despite her best efforts. Please, just let her go away. I don't want this. Rainbow Dash raised up one hoof to wipe the tears of laughter from her eyes, while waving the other in front of Trixie. Okay, ahaha, okay, stop, just stop. Clearing her throat, Rainbow Dash stifled her laughter. Though Trixie could tell it was just barely contained. The corners of Rainbow Dash's mouth constantly crept up, before she'd catch herself and attempt to put on a straight face again. Phew. So you've been roughing it, huh? Trixie's eyes narrowed while she watched the mocking Pegasus, unsure of how to respond with something that would not result in another volley. The best and easiest way to stop the laughing was probably to anger her. Taking a few deep breaths, she steadied herself. What tipped you off? The fact that you chased Trixie out of town without a bit to her name? You cowards. Shooting Rainbow Dash a cool glance, Trixie did her best to look smug. That seemed to do it. Rainbow Dash turned from snickering to nearly snarling. Hey, you're lucky you got off that easy. If it were up to me, you'd pay for putting all of Ponyville through that. That was more like it. Anger she could deal with. Oh, you would make Trixie pay? For what exactly? Trixie was there, and the only thing that Ursa destroyed was Trixie's home. It barely even scratched the roof of Ponyville. Serves you right for bringing it here, doesn't it? You almost destroyed every pony's home, but just ended up destroying your own. Twilight says there is a word for that, ironing. Now it was Trixie's turn to laugh. She quickly seized upon the opportunity and climbed out of the cavern, getting face to face with Rainbow Dash. It's pronounced irony, and it's not the right word for it even if Trixie had brought the Ursa to town. It is poetic justice, you fool. A confident smile returned to her face. It was amazing how easy it was to manipulate a country pony. If that Twilight Sugar Cube told you that, then she is as ignorant as you are. If she had not interrupted Trixie, she would have shown that incompetent unicorn some real magic. She saw Rainbow Dash spin around, turning her back to Trixie. With a feeling of triumph for driving the loud Pegasus running away, she added, "That's better. Yura." She did not get any further. Her eyes went wide as a set of hind hooves rapidly closed in on her face. Chapter 7. Wretched. Why is Trixie on the ground? Was the first thought that went through Trixie's mind as she found herself staring at a rock jutting up out of the mud. The second was not so much a thought, rather the realization that an entire herd of stampeding buffalo had somehow found their way into her head some time ago. Curling up on the ground, Trixie brought her hooves to her head, as every beat of her pulse seemed to threaten to make her head explode if she did not hold it in place. She heard some kind of long note from the world's most annoying instrument the entire time. A buzzing noise, as though she were at a restaurant ignoring other ponies' voices in the background. She could tell it was speech, but the words blurred together incomprehensibly. A set of fuzzy blue hooves entered her vision, and the buzzing began again, louder this time. Why don't they just go away? Can't that pony see Trixie is tired? She just wanted to sleep. Strangely, she could hear herself respond in that same buzzing. She wasn't sure what she'd said, just unthinkingly responding with something. It seemed to accomplish her goal, as the buzzing stopped. Trixie could see the blue hooves move to the right, or up, she supposed, out of sight. Good. She let her eyes close again, leaving her alone with the pounding in her head, and the unrelenting solo performance of whatever the heck that was. Her stomach turned, tearing Trixie from that much-desired sleep, as she retched up the meager meal she had scavenged. Pushing out a hoof to the ground, she tried to get up and away from the scene. She was only a few steps from her bed. She could rest there, but white fireworks flashed before her eyes as she did. It made her slump back down and cradle her head again, resolving not to move after all. With a push, she rolled onto her other flank. It was not clear to her when it happened, but the buzzing was back, and twice as annoying. Something was touching her neck. Giving a slow swat at her neck, Trixie opened her eyes again. This time it was some fuzzy pink and yellow pony. Doesn't any pony have the decency to leave Trixie be? She spotted a fast-moving rainbow-colored thing in the background. To her relief, the yellow pony turned away from her and buzzed at the other one for a change, letting Trixie rest again through the dropping. It seemed like they could not get enough of tormenting her, however, as each time she had finally fallen asleep. It felt as though she barely got a few minutes in before the buzzing and prodding started again. And she had to listen to herself saying something or other back, or follow a hoof with her eyes. It was a strange feeling, as if she was not really there, but just watching some mimicry of herself perform actions and commands that she could not make out. The only things that seemed to feel real were the pain and fatigue she had to struggle through just to earn a little more rest from her jailers. This seemed to just go on and on, much to the dazed unicorn's irritation, but she could not focus long enough to cast any magic to scare the pair off. Sometimes she woke with a horrible taste in her mouth. Usually it was the yellow pony that bothered her, with the blue one missing a few times. Then she saw a snow-white pony with a pink mane and what looked a bit like a red cross on her flank. The other two were behind her. Trixie did not really pay much attention to the ponies, but there was always that far too bright blue sky right above them each time they woke her up. She could have sworn before that the canopy blocked out almost all light when she was trying to find her way, but now she was certain the sun had to be growing on the branches. Opening her eyes once again at the prod of a hoof, she stared up at yet more trees, but they were different somehow. The wood did not stop, it was to the sides, above her, and seemingly all around. The bright sun was hidden somewhere behind it, or maybe it had set already. Trixie could not be sure. Hello. Welcome back. If you don't mind. What day is it? Blinking slowly, Trixie panned her gaze away from the wooden ceiling, settling on the fuzzy pony that spoke to her, or at least she thought it was speech, though she had never heard anyone speak so quietly. Day? Somehow the question felt incredibly familiar, but she could not place her hoof on it. Sunday. She remembered this well enough. Her show had been Saturday after all. Most exciting things in Equestria always seemed to happen on Saturdays, for some reason. It seemed this pleased the Pegasus, as she received a small smile before the next question followed. What is your name? Trixie. Again the strange feeling of familiarity, the great and powerful Trixie. Raising up a hoof, she tried to soothe her aching head, but was puzzled to find she could not reach it. Something was in the way, and it did not feel like her hat. Trixie touched the cool wet thing, looking at the other pony. Fluttershy beamed almost from ear to ear at the sight, a smile even Trixie could detect no acting in. Oh. That's great. I don't have to poke you now if you noticed that all on your own. The words were perplexing, but this was apparently a good sign, if it got the other pony that excited. What she was getting so thrilled over, Trixie did not understand. What kind of pony wouldn't know their own name? Let alone a pony that uses theirs as much as Trixie does. Trixie wondered why the pony just sat there staring at her. Did she expect something else? Attempting to remember who it was, or even trying to raise her own questions, felt like such a bother. Each attempt at doing so got drilled out by the pounding in her head. All she really wanted anymore was to just flee back into unconsciousness and hide from it all. Fortunately, it seemed her body agreed completely, and the other pony did not seem to mind or move when Trixie closed her eyes again. Chapter 8. Rude. A small blue unicorn filly galloped through the door, slamming it behind her with a kick while tears ran over her cheeks. All of them can go straight to Tartarus. Trixie cried out, shaking on her hooves. Her words echoed through the small hovel. She shook off her starry, purple hat and flung it at a wall. Trixie? A snow-white Pegasus with a blue mane, and a top hat kitty mark, looked up from her sewing, startled. School should not have ended for a few more hours. What's wrong, my little pony? Come here. She turned towards her filly and sank through her hind legs, spreading the front pair out towards Trixie invitingly. Already dashing halfway across the room, Trixie buried herself into the embrace with such force, she could hear a grunt above her. So sorry. She whimpered in a muffled voice, hiding her face by nuzzling against the fur. Soft caresses along her back seemed to brush away more of the trembling with each stroke. Sly Night Sky looked down at the gently shaking Trixie, wrapped up in her forelegs, patiently waiting for the soft sobbing to stop while comforting her. It's okay. Did something go wrong at school? Trixie opened her mouth to answer, but stopped as each thing she thought of saying brought on a quivering on her lips. Instead, she merely nodded in response. Upon getting no answer, Sly sighed, pulling teeth to find out what happened. Not a pleasant prospect. Suddenly, she perked up and showed a small grin while looking up to the ceiling. "Were they jealous of your nice hat?" she asked in a gentle tone, raising one hoof up to stroke Trixie's mane, but all she got in response was Trixie shaking her head. Were they jealous of Trixie's cute face? Oh, I know, maybe Trixie's pretty mane? She felt Trixie squirm in her grasp. Trixie's amazing eyes? Trixie's graceful tail? That beautiful coat of Trixie? So stop it, geez. Trixie's face burned red while she pushed away from her mother with her forelegs, but not managing to escape. Trixie and Sly each raised and lowered their gaze respectively, their eyes meeting in silence for a few moments. "You don't really have to stop, you know. How about you tell me what is wrong first?" her mother shot back. Trixie took a deep breath. "They are all better than me." Breaking eye contact, Trixie stared down at the floor. "They did not like my show at all. They did every spell better." Her voice quivered as she spoke. "They said I didn't even know real magic, that it was all just tricks. Trixie's only trickery." Sly pulled Trixie close again, scowling at the wall behind her. Well, what do they know? I know you have the best magic." The Pegasus fidgeted with her hooves. "I don't understand what the difference is. It's all magic, right? Who says real magic only comes from a horn?" She gave a glance over towards the bookshelf full of magic books she'd used to teach the little unicorn. "Everyone else," Trixie offered quietly, snuggling against Sly's chest. She'd been so excited when changing schools by the thought of having a whole new class to impress with her magic. She never imagined the difference in skill was so startling. "I'm sorry, Trixie. I don't know any unicorn magic. But I'm sure that you can learn some from your classmates." Sly went silent while she rested a lingering look at the crumpled up large hat by the door. "You should take better care of that." Blinking slowly, Trixie groaned painfully as she opened her eyes, staring up at the wooden ceiling again. "That does not look like Trixie's wagon." The throbbing headache made it difficult to focus for very long, but she caught another look at the room she was in. "Why is Trixie in here?" Faint memories of being tormented by some ponies that just would not let her be spurred Trixie on to scoot to the edge of the bed and roll out onto her hooves. "Trixie can't stay here. Who knows what they will." Wah! Her knees gave way under her own weight, sending her hurtling to the floor with a thud. Dazed from the fall, Trixie looked down at her legs, scared to see whatever they had done to her. In a panic, Trixie's mind ran the gambit from anything like a curse or poison to surgical. She was relieved to find nothing was wrong with her legs, but it also puzzled her. "What am I doing on the ground then if I'm fine?" Her ears perked up as she heard a creaking noise. Her head snapped towards the open doorway, revealing the yellow, now not so fuzzy, Pegasus. "Ah. That's right. Trixie saw her before, I think." Staring up at her, Trixie found the other merely stared right back at her without saying a word. Deciding to break the silence herself then, Trixie spoke up. "Why is Trixie here? What have you done to the great and powerful Trixie?" "Trixie will not be lenient if you do not release her immediately." Wincing from her own shouting, Trixie decided maybe she'd tone it down next time, but she felt it was important to come out strong. It certainly seemed to have done the trick as she watched her jailer give a surprisingly adorable cry and hurriedly retreat behind the doorpost, whimpering. "Trixie still has it." It never worked that well before, though. Now that she thought about it, she had never heard of a jailer that would cover before a downed pony that merely raised her voice. "What is your name? Tell the great and powerful Trixie," she demanded impatiently. Fluttershy flinched as Trixie addressed her again. I'm Fluttershy." "What was that?" Trixie blinked and rose a hoof to one of her ears, checking if they had fallen off halfway through. My name is Fluttershy. Letting her bangs fall in front of her face, the yellow pony hid even more of herself. Didn't quite catch that. Trixie was fairly sure at this point it was not her hearing that was at fault. All she got back from Fluttershy this time was a squeaking sound. Letting out a sigh, she raised a hoof up to press against her forehead, trying to ward off the oncoming headache of talking to the shy mare, only to find she'd set off a burning of 1,000 suns where she touched. She hissed at the pain. Pulling her hoof back quickly, the pain subsided somewhat again, but her mood was even worse now. Ugh. What is wrong with you? You were talking to Trixie before asking Trixie those inane questions. Closing her eyes tightly, Trixie had managed to rekindle her headache once again. Trixie was surprised when she felt something soft press against her left side. It shuffled below her stomach, then lifted, helping Trixie to her feet and guiding her somewhere. Soon feeling the blankets against her fur again, she opened her eyes to find Fluttershy beside her, still looking terrified, but definitely the one that had helped her. I'm Fluttershy.